Welcome back. Greg Swenson from the Republican Overseas Organisation here in London is in the studio. Welcome, Greg. Well, we've got lots to talk about. Obviously, these peace talks, the Ukrainian peace talks have been going on in Riyadh, in Saudi, between Russia and America. We heard at the beginning of the week that Zelensky would join them today, actually, but suddenly that was not a thing, with Zelensky moaning that he'd been excluded, etc., etc. Donald Trump, in one of his Mar-a-Lago press conferences now saying, well, what he said, I hear they're upset about not having a seat. Well, they've had a seat for 3 years and a long time before that. That could have been settled very easily. You should never have started. That's a bit controversial. Yeah. You should have made a deal. Have we got any... let's play some footage of Trump talking about this. Can we play that now?
And I think it's going very well. But today I heard, oh, well, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal. I could have made a deal for Ukraine that would have given them almost all of the land, everything, almost all of the land, and no people would have been killed, and no city would have been demolished, and not one dome would have been knocked down. But they chose not to do it that way. And President Biden, in all fairness, he doesn't have a clue. What he was so bad.
We're hearing that Russia wants to force Ukraine to hold new elections in order to sign any kind of a peace deal. Is that something that the U.S. would ever support?
Well, we have a situation where we haven't had elections in Ukraine, where we have martial law, or essentially martial law in Ukraine, where the leader in Ukraine, I mean, I hate to say it, but he's down at 4% approval rating, and where a country has been blown to smithereens. You got most of the cities are laying on their sides. The buildings are collapsed. It looks like a massive demolition site. So, you know, people are tired of it.
Now, Greg, we've got a lot to talk about here, and I want to at some point reference that fantastic speech that the Vice President J.D. Vance made in Munich last Friday, roasting all those cowering and useless, loser, squabbling EU leaders. Perfect. Bunch of tossers. Why not say the word?
Can
you know?
Say that?
Can you say that? I just did, I guess. Anyway, we'll come on to that in a little while. And by the way, as long as Trump carries on like he does and like he is now, and the Republicans win the next election, J.D. Vance must be the next president, and what a great president it looks like he will be. Brilliant man, brilliant speech that. But first of all, let's talk about these peace talks. What exactly is going on here? Obviously, at one point we thought Zelensky would be there, and I do think that America and Russia would be very unwise to forge any kind of agreement without his agreement, because that would not look good, and if Ukraine doesn't stop fighting, you haven't got a peace, have you? But that notwithstanding, you've got these talks going on between Russia and America, and what I think is going on here is Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, the American administration, the new administration, is effectively divorcing Europe and just saying, look, you guys start looking after your own house. We are not going to back you anymore, and frankly, we don't want to send billions and billions of dollars and weapons to this country's faraway country anymore when we think a peace can be sorted out, and you can't come to the peace talks because you'll screw them right up. I mean, this is hardline stuff, isn't it?
No, absolutely, and it's not that America is abandoning Europe. Right? It's just that they're insisting, we are insisting that Europe actually gets their act together and start spending money on defense and security, which is really important, obviously, but also, just kind of getting their act together in terms of how they're handling these crises, right? There is no central power in Europe right now. Germany has abandoned any concept of being the leader of the EU or of NATO. France is useless. Italy is doing their best, but they're spending, less than 2% on defense and security. So there's no collective argument in Europe about what to do. So why would you include Europe in these negotiations? Who do you include? Macron? Anybody in Germany. Like, it's just...
Well, one of the things to say about a lot of these European leaders is they're on their last legs politically.
Absolutely.
So Olaf Scholz, Macron, they're not going to be around for much longer.
I love the photo from like 6 or 9 months ago where they drew circles around every one of them. Giorgia Meloni is the only one who will last.
Yeah.
And Keir Starmer will last 4 years, but he's polling at, in the 20s, right? So, and the people in the UK are very against any sort of involvement in this conflict, and they are not supporting Keir Starmer. So, yeah, the political movement in Europe needs to be fixed, right? Whether it's done through someone actually taking a leadership role, which no one has done besides Giorgia Meloni, or you just have to understand that Europe doesn't deserve a seat at the table because they've done very little to support Ukraine.
Yeah, well, look what happened when Keir Starmer suggested he might put boots on the ground. Olaf Scholz stormed out, proving that these people are just squabbling, dysfunctional people who literally could not agree on what day of the week it is. If you put them in the negotiations, you'll never get anywhere.
Yeah.
Do you feel that Donald Trump and America are ploughing the right furrow here? Do you think they're doing the right thing by sort of overriding concerns and saying, let's talk to the Russians?
Yes, absolutely, for a few reasons. One is this is a proxy war between the U.S. and Russia, and that needs to end, right? Russia has 4,500 nuclear warheads. That nobody wants to get into another Cold War or especially a hot war. So
America's got China to worry about.
Exactly, and that's the second point, Kevin. I'm glad you brought it up, because we have to think about Russia aligning with China. That's a bad outcome, right? You got 4,500 nuclear warheads, as I mentioned. China's got over 500 ships, I believe, naval ships. They got the hypersonic missiles. This is a bad formula. It's not polite. It's not, nobody wants to support Putin. It doesn't mean if you're advocating for peace that you're a Putin sympathizer, as a lot of the government censorship will say. But this is important to keep China and Russia segregated, and at the same time understand that nobody wants 20-year-old body bags coming home from Russia and Ukraine. Putin doesn't care about that. He's got plenty of bodies to burn. Which is horrible. Again, I'm not advocating for Putin, but we need to end this war.
I mean, Russia is a very strange entity. I mean, it is a huge country with a tiny economy.
Yeah.
Its economy is smaller than Italy's. It's smaller than Italy's. But it spends vast amount of its small economy on its military power.
That's right.
So it has this massive, disproportionate military power, which is what makes it a superpower. In no other way is Russia a superpower.
No, they're except for, meaningless.
Yeah, except for if you get on the wrong side of us, we got a lot of nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
That is the extent of their power. Now, China has power on a whole slew of levels, and that is who America's worried about.
Yeah.
So they want to get rid of this little pesky dispute over in the East and concentrate on the real enemy, which is China.
That's right. And so that's it's natural for America to focus on China, obviously. The Europeans have been asleep at the wheel for for decades now. After the Cold War ended, they just thought, oh, America will look after us. That's not going to work anymore. Yeah. And think about, America has $36 trillion in debt. So this whole idea that we can outspend the Russians, yes, we can, because, again, they're small ball. But the way Reagan won the Cold War and Mrs. Thatcher was to grow their own economies and then spend 6% of our GDP on military, so that even though Russia was spending a much greater percentage of GDP, their GDP was useless and lame. Yeah. That's how you win. But the Europeans, all they do is spend their money on their welfare states, and look what happens.
Yeah, indeed. Let's talk about Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer, I mean, he's playing politics. He's trying to sort of bestride the world stage. Doesn't really fit him, to be honest with you. He's trying to show to the British people, you know, I'm a player here, you know, I'm the bridge between America and Europe. Well, he's absolutely not. He seems to have missed the fact that when J.D. Vance launched that amazing speech, that amazing roasting of all the useless, weak, woke European leaders who are lost in their own left-wing nonsense, that he was pointing his finger directly at Keir Starmer. He does not see that Keir Starmer is in any way different to the rest of those EU losers, and he's right. I'm worried about the special relationship because Donald Trump is absolutely right. Everybody in Europe agrees with him when he says, you guys, NATO, you've got to start paying your way. He's demanding that every NATO nation, including Britain, of course, spends 5% of their GDP on defence. I mean, he can talk. He only spends 3.38%.
Right.
But, you know, that's a lot more than we do. So Keir Starmer seems to think he's best mates with him. And this is his response. So Donald says effectively to Keir, you start spending 5%. Keir Starmer's effective response is, well, at the moment we're spending 2.3%, and I put in place a roadmap that might take us to 2.5%. In what way is that going to endear him to Trump?
Yeah, the roadmap concept is so absurd.
Why do you need a roadmap?
Yeah.
Just do it.
Yeah. And look, you know, the UK is punching above their weight at 2.3. Yeah. It's better than the rest of the pathetic countries in Europe, you know, except with the exception of Poland.
There's quite a few better than us.
Yeah, no, Poland's at 4.
Denmark.
No, absolutely. But, you know, with the exception, you know, those are small economies. Let's face it. Yeah. Germany, France, Italy, Spain, useless. Yeah. Okay, so, you know, the French military's got a proud history. I really do think that. Germany, no. But the UK punches above their weight. It's
biggest military power in Europe.
It's important, right? But it's completely inadequate. And that's what we have to think about. And by the way, I'll remind the viewers that the U.S. has cut military spending for during the Biden admin. Like, they've cut 3% 3 years in a row. That's what we should worry about, too. Now, Trump will change that. Trump will clean it up. But we really need the Europeans to understand that, you know, this whole 2% thing is not going to work.
And just lastly, you know, it's being very demonized that the Russians right now, or the Americans are sitting across the table from the Russians. But Churchill said, you know, George Orr is better than war. I mean, if we just never ever... I mean, I know everybody knows Putin's in the wrong. Trump is being classic Trump when he says to Zelensky, you started it. I don't think he did, to be fair.
Yeah, I mean, you know... They're
pushing it a bit there. But if talking must be good, surely. I mean, aiming for peace is better than endlessly fighting that grotesque war in which hundreds of thousands of young men are dying in horrific circumstances day after day.
It's absolutely true. Like, you know, we can't turn the clock back. It's not February of 2022 anymore. We have to understand that this is now, that was then, and it's important to stop the killing. And you might argue, and we all do, that, you know, Putin's the bad guy here. But again, he has 4,500 nuclear warheads. He is doing, he's the uncontrollable one in this thing. It is a proxy war between the U.S. and Russia. So the fact that we're leaving Zelensky out, who hasn't had an election in quite some time, and we're leaving the Europeans out, who are useless and haven't supported Ukraine, you know, I mean, let's face it, like, they're just not, right? So the Germans were nice. They sent some blankets or some MREs. But this has to be between the bad guy and the U.S., who are supporting the good guys, if you want to make that argument. But it has to end. Yeah, this is crazy.
Very interesting times, and you know, the Europeans got our unequivocal support for Ukraine. Well, it hasn't been that unequivocal. I mean, we haven't sent any troops in, have we?
No.
Do you know what I mean? We just sent them money and weapons. So it's been very stylized from the start, and it still is stylized. So with reservations, You've got to have reservations about this, but I think, as Churchill said, war is better than war.
Yeah.
So if we could bring this, I don't think that Trump deserves criticism for trying to end this awful conflict.
Because everything else has failed for 3 years. And so Biden was asleep at the wheel, for sure.
Wow.
This whole incrementalist support of Ukraine. And now Trump is stuck with it, like a lot of things, like inflation, like the situation in the Middle East. Trump didn't create these things. He's just trying to fix it.
Yeah, indeed. Well, listen, I wanted to talk to you more about J.D. Vance's speech, but I think we know what that was all about.
It was a
remarkable moment when I think America... America is still the world policeman, whatever you think, because it's the most powerful country on earth. And I think what J.D. Vance essentially announced is we are not going to be the policeman in terms of economic power. We're not going to push you around economically. We're not going to push you around militarily. But maybe, just maybe, we'll try and put you straight culturally.
Yeah.
And they're going to police us in terms of our wokery and our disgraceful assaults on freedom of speech. And whatever anyone says, well done, J.D. Vance. God bless America.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good to see you, Greg. As
Great to
always,
be
come
here,
in
Kevin.
again soon.